So my name is Daniel Otunge from Africa Science Media Center. We are glad to host you again this time round with Dr. Ed Mabaya, who is going to talk about the research that they have been doing under the African Seed Access Index, TASAI, which has been doing a lot of research in the seed industry, more or less comparative analysis to look at various areas of the qualities or improved seed in Africa and how accessible they are to the small-scale farmers. Because one of the key things and the most important agricultural input, as you know, is quality seed. So access to quality seed is directly relevant to food security in Africa. And the work that Ed and the team have been doing has been very helpful in terms of giving a direction and making recommendations in terms of what really needs to be done from country to country. And they've done a lot of work in Kenya, in Ghana, Malawi, and other countries that we're talking about. So Ed is the Chief Scientific Advisor to TASAI, and he's also a research professor in the Department of Global Development at Cornell University, USA. He's speaking to us from Cornell in New York. And Ed, good morning, and you're most welcome to this press briefing.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I hope everybody can hear me. Greetings, good day, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. It's been introduced. My name is Ed Mabaya, and first of all, I'd like to thank African Science Media Center for hosting this event. We appreciate this opportunity. I also want to acknowledge that I have team members from the TASAI who are available in the room. They'll come on board during the Q&A session. I've just been tasked to present this collective body of work that we've gathered over the last 10 years in more than 20 countries to share this with you. As you can imagine, this is not an easy task. Each of those countries would require almost several hours to do full justice to the work. But what we're going to present to you is going to be a quick snapshot of some of the items that we want to highlight. Then we'll rely on a question and answer session to get into some of the details that people have an interest in. I will be sharing a slideshow, and I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Just give me a second to get that online. And tell me once we are fully loaded.
Yes, we can see it there. Go ahead.
Good. And I'll ask colleagues if you can mute your microphone. It might make it a little bit easier for everybody to hear. So I'm going to be sharing some highlights from the seed sector studies across Africa, highlights from the African Seed Access Index country studies. So I want to start from the beginning with simple basics. You know, the case for improved seed. We know that I'm talking to people who know agriculture very well, but it bears repeating that, you know, why are we interested in improved seed? You know, we know that improved seeds can deliver state-of-the-art technology to farmers, including higher yield, disease resistance, pest resistance, climate change adaptation, which is very important now across the continent, improved nutrition, and longer shelf life. These are things that breeders are able to encode into any seed that goes out there, almost like software that allows farmers to get the most recent of technologies and deliver it to the farmer in a very affordable way. Now, I've often been asked this question because I go around the world preaching this gospel of the importance of improved seed. But you always get asked the question, how come so few African farmers are using improved seed? By most estimates, less than 30% of African farmers are using seed that has gone through some form of breeding programs. Most of them are using seed that is inherited from their parents or recycled from a previous generation. Part of the problem is that the seed systems in Africa are extremely complicated, that they involve multiple players who have multiple interests, and it's not so easy for seed to go from a breeding program to find its way into rural areas, maybe somewhere in Kisumu. So many players in the middle that make this process much more complicated than it would be in developing countries, so to say. So with that as a background, the African Seed Access Index was created to promote the creation and maintenance of enabling environments for competitive seed systems serving smallholder farmers. We're very specific about targeting, ensuring that this technology actually reaches out to smallholder farmers. It is this enabling environment that TASAI measures, tracks, and compares across time and across different African countries. We've been doing this for the last 10 years, and we've built a robust database of analysis over this particular period. Our theory of change is very simple. We believe that if we create evidence-based interventions in the areas of research and development, that is breeding activity, seed policy and regulations, industry competitiveness, institutional support, and service to smallholder farmers. If we can get all this packaged nicely with evidence-based interventions, the outcome will be that we'll have a competitive seed system serving smallholder farmers, availing to smallholder farmers high-quality seed that is affordable and accessible and available. By those last two, I mean it needs to close the last mile to get it as close to the farmer as possible, and it needs to be available in packages that small farmers can actually afford to pay and try out to grow on their own. Our methods are somewhat complicated, but try to break down we go to each country in a year, and we have a list of different indicators, which I'll get to in a little bit. Comprehensive, about 22 different indicators. We go to a country, we choose the top 4 cereal and legume crops that are important for food and nutritional security for that particular country. We run industry surveys where we get industry opinion to complement some of the quantitative indicators. What you see on the left here is kind of our scorecard when we're asking for industry opinion that ranges from very poor to excellent. So we rate the industry, the seed players that are active in those particular countries. We also have this work reviewed by external reviewers that are key to the seed sector in those particular countries. This often includes consultants, it includes government regulators, it includes people from the seed services, all the different experts that we can amass within those particular countries. And the main output is usually a country report, which, by the way, we're now complementing that with a visualized dashboard. I'll get into that towards the end. And we do data comparisons across years where we've done multiple country studies. You see in the next slide. And we also try to do this comparison across different African countries. As you know, I think most of you follow Africa Cup of Nations. We like to compare African countries against their neighbors. It's not as important to compare with Europe and the US and South America, but Kenya wants to know how it's performing relative to Uganda, and Ghana wants to know how it's doing relative to Nigeria, Zimbabwe versus Zambia. We think that by creating this competition among African countries, we can create this race to the top where they can learn from each other. So to date, we've done multiple rounds of studies. I will classify them into 4 different rounds, starting as early as 2014, 2015, when we did our pilot studies in 4 African countries. Then we followed up by a launch in 2016 and 17, then 2018 and 2019, and then the last round that is ongoing now is from 2020 to 2022. You can see here that in countries such as Kenya, we've actually done 4 rounds of studies. In some countries, we only did 1 or 2, but in Kenya and in Uganda, we've done 4 rounds of studies. In several countries, we've done 3 rounds or 2 rounds of studies. Our goal is really to cover this entire map of Africa. You can see we've done quite a good job in East and Southern Africa, and we're starting to get significant presence in West Africa as well, including Francophone country and Lusophone countries as well. Now we need to start conquering the northern part of Africa in some of those gaps that you still see on the map. It's our goal to have all 54 African countries represented and covered in our studies. So how are people using the study and information that's coming out of TASAI data and analysis? I'll share with you some examples, and these are not meant to be exhaustive at all. These are just merely meant to be illustrative. So the data and analysis is used to inform seed industry reforms. That includes policy, industry, and institutional reforms, and also guide private and public investments in those particular areas. As an example, for government reform, we did some TASAI studies in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, that led to significant sector-wide reforms in that country. We also, our studies that we did are being used to inform or shape the national seed roadmap in Nigeria, so which is a very key strategic document for the government. Development partners and donors are using this information to shape the investment priorities in different African countries. For example, the African Development Bank invested about $5.4 million in a seed reform project that was largely informed by the studies that TASAI had done. AGRA has done a program, an investment program in Uganda that has also been shaped by the kind of recommendations coming out of TASAI as well. There's many more examples of those kind of things, but I'm just giving some illustration here. The private sector is also very much interested in gathering market or industry intelligence that they can use to prioritize where they're going to go. Especially multinational companies that are looking at Africa as a new market are keen to see where the opportunities lie. And domestic companies as well are trying to see what the next frontier, the next year looks like in terms of competition and industry development. The National Seed Trade Association uses this information to advocate the reform agenda. For example, in Malawi, we have STEM, in Kenya, we have STAC, Uganda is USTA, USTA, and all these seed trade associations take the information from TASAI, and they can go and lobby and advocate with government to say, we have been asking for a reform in this particular area. Often the response from government is, we're trying our best. But now with TASAI studies, they can go and say, look how we're doing comparing to neighboring countries. Why can't we be like Kenya? Why can't we be like Ghana or whatever country they want to measure themselves against? Lastly, TASAI is starting to be used as a monitoring and evaluation to see how much progress we're making in seed sector development across Africa. We're currently involved in a project now that is shaping the CADA biannual review with the African Union Commission. And some of the information that we're gathering from TASAI is going to be used to hold African countries accountable for their Malabo commitments. So I'll share now, switch the gears and share with you some of the highlights from the country studies. Like I said, we are looking here at 22 different indicators across more than 20 African countries that have had multiple rounds of studies. So you can imagine what you're getting here is just, a flavor of the findings. We encourage you to go to the TASAI website. I think they can post a hyperlink to our publication, TASAI's publication website, where you can actually get into detail to look at a particular country and see what TASAI is finding for that particular country. So I'm going to be painting with a very broad brush some of the key findings that are coming. Starting off the top, one of the key findings that we have is we're tracking this information. We're finding that maize dominates the breeding programs in many of the countries. Here's an example here of Nigeria. And sorry, let me start here. I think I skipped the slide. So here, let's start in Kenya. You can see in Kenya, we're tracking 4 crops: maize, bean, cowpea, and sorghum. The top line, that's the orange, is actually maize. The 81 varieties that we released between 2017 and 2019, and many of those were actually of maize varieties. Dominance of maize as a variety release. 63 of those varieties were maize, 7 were bean, 5 were cowpeas, and only 6 were sorghum. Maize is driven by the need to address drought tolerance and maize-lethal necrosis disease. But you can see across the board, when Africa is shifting its agenda from food security to food and nutritional security, we need to move away from emphasizing the dominance of the staple crop, which is often maize or rice, and diversifying that to include other crops such as the bean and legume and small grains as well. You see that this trend is evident in other countries as well. For example, here is the case for, I don't know if this is moving. Okay, here is the case for Nigeria. You see maize at the top, outperforming all the other different crops. Next, you see Zimbabwe, maize again dominating all the other different crops, such as sorghum, soybean, and beans. You see Zambia, maize is on top again, and rice, groundnut, and bean are the distant second and third and fourth. So this is showing us here that it's excellent that we have good breeding program for maize, but we need to invest more in the breeding program for the other crops as well. Okay. Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay on the movement of the slides. We're also finding that there's a diversity in the sources of basic seed. So basic seed is really the seed that seed companies need to use to be able to produce commercial seed. And the sources from mostly public sources, from National Agricultural Research Institutions and public programs such as CGR, CMIT, and IIT as an example. A few of them are now producing their own sources of basic seed. And there's also some new commercial seed companies that are doing this. So basic seed, as you can see, is being sourced from a variety of public and private sources. In the advanced countries where the seed sector is somewhat mature, seed companies are starting to maintain their own basic seed. For example, in Kenya, upwards of 64% of the companies are maintaining their own basic seed. In emerging seed sectors, seed companies are still relying heavily on public breeding programs. You can see that in countries like Ghana, where 83% of the basic seed comes from the National Agricultural Research Institutions. And lastly, over the last 5 years, there's a few new players that have come into the market, like Quali Basic Seed in East Africa and LCIC in Ghana, that are providing basic seed to commercial companies on a profitable level. That's quite encouraging. Okay. We also see that there's a few companies that are dominating the maize market. This here is a measurement of the market share of the top 4 companies for maize in each of the countries. You can see here that in most of the countries, more than 50% of the market is dominated by just 4 companies. In Southern Africa, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Madagascar, South Africa, that number is even above 90%. It's only in West Africa where there is a diversity, like Senegal, Ghana, Burkina Faso, DRC, where the market is still very young and there's many multiple players there, and there's still a lot of room for multiple competition. We believe that competition breeds excellence, and the more competitive a market we can have, the better it's going to be for smallholder farmers. All right, we are looking at the strategy programs and the distribution of seed through different outlets. This is showing you an example of Ghana, where we realize that in Ghana, the government subsidy program is dominating the market as a distribution outlet. The Planning for Food and Jobs is a government input subsidy program. It's the single largest buyer of seed in Ghana for all the 4 crops. You can see that number there in yellow: 86% of soybean, 68% of cowpeas, 83% of rice, and 90% of maize. We think that growers, they are becoming overly reliant on this program, with about most of the market going through that outlet. There's very low volume of seed that is going through agro dealers or from seed companies straight to farmers. That is an avenue that we think is much more sustainable in the long run. Okay. In the other countries, you see too that there is, quite significant reliance on government subsidy programs. But we wanted to ask the seed companies how they rate their satisfaction with government seed programs. And the numbers are not very encouraging. And this is why we really encourage for more sustainable ways of seed distribution. If you look at the rating by seed companies, the government subsidy programs are rated at 24% in Uganda, 30% in Kenya, Burkina Faso 38%, Rwanda 43%, Ghana 43%, Malawi 54%. By any measure, these are failing grades in terms of performance. And a large part of that is because government payments to seed companies under the subsidy programs are extremely inefficient. I've talked to seed companies that have almost gone bankrupt because it has taken them more than a year to get paid by government after they've distributed seed through the subsidy programs. We believe that this is an area that needs to be fixed. Most seed companies are very small and they're very constrained on cash. So when they do not have this money payment, we look at the variety release process and the length of the variety release process, as well as the satisfaction of seed companies and breeders on the process itself. Here's an example from Kenya, where you can see that the actual time it takes to release a variety has not changed much over the, from 2013 to present day. It's roughly about 32 to 36 months. But you can see the satisfaction of seed companies has been going up over the same period. The reason for this is primarily that the government and public policymakers and variety release committees put in place clear variety release processes where there's concurrent application for DUS and national performance trials. And there's engagement with private inspectors, involvement of seed companies in the variety release process. By making this process clear and transparent, the satisfaction has actually gone up, as rated by breeders and seed companies. So that's another area where you think that engagement with private sector and working closely with government can actually affect the performance and rating of the country. However, the cost of variety release is still very high in many countries. These numbers are staggering. If you look at Ghana, to release a variety, it costs anywhere from 10 to 53,000 US dollars. In Kenya, it's only 3,000. Mali, 7,300. Nigeria, 18,000. Uganda ranges from 5,000 to 24,000. So this variance here is not really justified by any meaningful analysis of cost. We think this is somewhat arbitrary. We think that some of these numbers need to go down, and this also needs to be standardized and transparent way of measuring this cost of variety release. Otherwise, if the costs remain very high, there's going to be very few varieties released on the market, and ultimately, smallholder farmers have very little options for varieties that they can plant. One of the areas that is also something that the Seed Trade Association is extremely important as it works as an interface between private sector and public sector. They are the mouthpiece of the industry. So you look at the performance, we rate them on overall activeness and seed issues, effectiveness and advocacy for the private sector. Do they have a functional secretariat? How good is the government structures? You can see South Africa there is rated extremely high at 81%, and the numbers go down from there, seconded by Malawi, Tanzania, Ghana, Zambia, Uganda, now in the 60%. And when it comes to Mali and DRC, those numbers are way down at 32 and 40% respectively. We believe that strengthening this National Seed Trade Association is one easy way that we can actually get the private sector to work very closely with public sector to deliver these varieties to smallholder farmers. The emergence of seed inspection services. You see the number of seed inspection services. In most countries, they rely on government seed inspectors that are indicated in yellow. Few countries are implementing seed inspection services that is privatized, such as in South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Kenya. In some countries, they're using a hybrid of those. We believe that private inspectors are probably the way of the future, and more countries are starting to integrate that. Private inspectors in Burundi have yet to be accredited and deployed, but you can see in most of the countries, the numbers are extremely low, and we believe that for them to do an effective job ensuring quality seed is being produced, we need to increase the number of seed inspectors available in most of the countries. Lastly, one of the key areas that we track is availability of seed in small packages. If seed is going to be distributed or targeted to smallholder farmers, most of them feel more comfortable buying seed in small packages. So smallholder farmers are not going to buy a 25 kg bag of seed. But if you can break this down to packages as small as 2 kgs, you start to see that there's higher uptake numbers for that. So Kenya, Tanzania are doing extremely well, with more than 80% of the seed being distributed in very small packages. Then you see Ghana, Rwanda, Burkina Faso, about half of the seed is available in small packages. But the other countries such as South Africa, Malawi, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, there's very little seed that's available in packages that are small enough to try. So that we encourage those countries to increase the volume of seed that's being marketed in these trial packages that are suitable for smallholder farmers. To conclude, here are some key messages. We believe that African countries are at different stages of seed sector development, ranging from nascent to mature. So it's very hard to kind of lump all the countries together, where South Africa is fairly advanced, and the Burundis of the world and several countries in West Africa are still very much in the early stages. As I have already said, maize dominates the breeding programs, variety release programs in most countries, maize and rice. We would want to encourage that there's a much more focus towards nutrition and drought-resistant crops. Basic seed companies are sourcing seed from private and public sources. Companies in mature seed sectors are starting to maintain their own basic seed in-house. And we see an emergence of private seed companies that specialize in seeds, in basic seed production, and this is quite encouraging. We see, I think I did not cover this slide, somehow I skipped this. There's very low involvement of women in seed business. From a gender lens, we believe that there should be more women involved in the seed sector. So far, we're seeing very low levels of participation by women. A small number of seed companies still dominate maize seed markets across many of the countries. As you could see, the top 4 countries dominate more than 90% in many countries of the seed market. When it comes to subsidy programs, they are still very dominant in countries such as Ghana and Burkina Faso, where government is the main buyer of seed. The main challenge with the subsidy programs is late payments to seed companies that are stifling the industry. The variety release process is the key point to highlight. There is importance of clearly cost-effective variety release processes. In most countries, it's still developing and it's still evolving. We also have a concern about the high cost of variety release in several countries, which might be hindering the amount of varieties that make it out to the market. The national seed trade associations are still a very key platform for private sector seed industry to advocate for reform with government. So the more we can empower the seed trade association, the more we can have good private-public partnership. Private seed inspectors complement public inspectors in countries like Kenya, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and South Africa. We believe that this is a model of the future that has both private and public sector involved in seed inspection services. And lastly, seed companies in Kenya and Tanzania and a few other countries are packaging seed in small sizes that suit smallholder farmers. We encourage this kind of marketing approach that is very friendly to smallholder farmers. We are at about 1:30, and I was given 30 minutes, and I want to end by showing you some of our partners. We're working with AGRA, USAID, Bill and Melinda Gates, African Development Bank, AATF, our technology partners, Development Gateway. We've worked with UK Aid. I'm based at Cornell University, and we've also worked with Alliant RDC and Adam Smith International. I want to thank you for your time and also point to you that we have a rich reservoir of information that's available online. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at TASAI Index, very clever name. You can follow us on LinkedIn on the African Access Index. And if you need any information at all, you can send an email to info@tasai.org. And much of this information is available on our website, tasai.org. And with that, I hand back to our moderator and hopefully looking forward to a good Q&A session. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see more faces. Thank you.